Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining us here at Segpay, and a very warm welcome to our webinar, Simplifying the Visa Integrity Risk Program. It's a very important program. In fact, I think it's a critical program for our industry. It's relatively new, but we wanted to spend some time with you to help clarify some of the myths, to help clarify some of the questions you may have, because we've all got to get compliant with this, whether we like it or not. But here at Segpay, it's going to help us to become compliant. We want to help you to become compliant, and we're with you all the way on the journey to paid. We will talk you through some of the highlights of the VIRP. We'll talk you through how to comply with the reporting requirements using the Segpay tools like the merchant portal that you should be familiar with. We'll also have a Q&A session. Throughout the webinar, please feel free to press the Q&A button and add your questions in there. When we get to the Q&A section, I'll read out the question, and our esteemed panel who are with us today will be able to address any questions or clarifications that you've got. Without further ado, let me introduce the panel to you. We have Kathy, who's the president and CEO of Segpay, who's based in Florida. Welcome, Kathy. Myself, Chief Commercial Officer Brian, based in the UK. We have Chris, who's our Senior Vice President of Risk and Compliance, based in Canada. And Paul, Head of Underwriting, who's based in Europe. Welcome, panel, and thank you for giving us your time as well today. Just a few things before I hand over to Kathy. Number one, this is being recorded, just to make you aware of that. Number two, we will, after this, be sending out a link, not only for the deck that we're presenting today, but also some of the links, the helpful links that we're going to be providing to you, and also for your feedback. We'd love to hear from you to see how we did today, but also, and in particular, we'd love to hear if there are any other topics that you would like us to cover off in any future webinars. We had our first webinar on this topic yesterday. It was very well attended, and it looks like today is also pretty well attended. So thank you once again. One final piece, anything that we say here does not constitute any legal advice or counsel. Please do ensure you consult your own legal counsel for any questions that you have to this. So without further ado, over to Florida. Kathy, can you just walk us through what the VIRP is and some of the key elements of the VIRP, please?
Sure. Thank you, Brian. And thank you, everyone, for joining our webinar. It's our very first webinar. I guess our first one was yesterday. You were around too. And we pulled this together because over the last month, starting mid-May, we sent out 2 requests that help us get into compliance with Visa's new program. One was an adult content checklist, which many of you have done over the last several years, but this is now updated to include all of the elements of the VIRP program, and will require you to fill it out and upload your policies. And the second request was for us all to add a complaint link or takedown link on the footer of your website. Both of those items are due by the end of June. So this is our final push to get everyone on board and in compliance with us. So a little bit about the program. Visa's Integrity Risk Program is really an update to Visa's Global Protection Program. It was announced last year and went into effect in April of this year. VIRP is very similar to MasterCard's program that rolled out in 2020. So a lot of these concepts and requirements, you all are in compliance. There was one additional caveat, I guess, is that VIRP now requires compliance with the consumer age verification laws, jurisdictional laws that we need to follow. So Visa's approach. So there were some fee changes that we've all noticed. Registration fees went up from $500 a year to $950. There's also transactional fees that have been passed along to us. So in the US, there's a 10 basis points plus 10 cents per transaction rate increase that was flowed through to us. Many of your acquirers, if we work directly with one, have flowed that through to you as well. And in Europe, it's 10 basis points plus 2 cents per transaction. I actually sat on a webinar with Visa going through this program, and I asked the question, is this to squeeze out small players, make it cost prohibitive? And the response back was absolutely not. It was that they wanted to staff up their team to provide more oversight and be more engaged with our market. And I can say all of our acquiring partners now today are being reviewed by Visa. The message that we've been giving you, I'm sure you're receiving from other providers in this space as well. So what are the elements of VIRP? So first, this one you guys are all very familiar with, it's content moderation policy. This was rolled out with the MasterCard regulations back in 2020. And really, regardless of the type of content you sell, I know in 2020, we really focused on fans and cams or any user-generated content. This now has studio-produced content in this requirement, and that we must maintain effective controls to monitor and then block content if it's not appropriate. For user-generated content, you must have a detailed policy on how you are moderating that content, meaning it must be reviewed prior to being posted. If you're using tools, and you should be using tools, outline what those tools are and how they're helping maintain compliance. If you're a CAM program, same thing. You must have tools in place to manage the live streams and be able to detect if there's unverified users in a stream or if there's something else going on in that stream that is not compliant. Both user-generated and CAM sites must have tools in place. Any program of any size can't just rely on human moderation. You must have a third-party tool. And subscription programs in the past, we thought we were off the hook because this is all produced content, but those that are using produced or produce their own content must have an internal policy on the type of content that's prohibited and what controls you have in place to make sure your models are of age. Establishing an onset code of conduct is also very helpful and a best practice. So another element of VIRP is content creator model age verification policy. Again, this goes back to the MasterCard regulations. All of you should have this in place. So for user-generated content, you must have a policy outlining your age verification process. You should also outline the number of people reviewing this, the IDs that are gathered up, and you must list out any tools you're using to verify the content creator's age. All content creators must be verified prior to posting. And then if the content creators have other individuals within their content or their video, they must have consent and IDs on those individuals and be prepared to produce that information should it get called upon. For studio produced content, again, we talked about code of conduct, but also be prepared to share a model release form. If you're using third-party produced content, a good idea would be to actually request some of their model release forms as well as IDs to make sure that they're in compliance with the requirements. So this is a hot one. We've been on all of our merchants the last 30 days to make sure that there's a takedown request or complaint link on the footer of your website. So every website must have this process. Every merchant must have a policy that's in place that states that these complaints will be handled within a 7-day period. If content is identified and is illegal, it must be removed immediately. And each month, the merchant must report all takedown requests or complaints. So under the MasterCard guidelines, it was listed that it must be available upon request. Visa stepped that up a notch and we must report monthly. So even if you've had no complaints, you must file a nil report. And here's one of the things that we included with our request was actually a sample takedown request form for your footer, as well as a sample policy that you can use. And at the end of this presentation, you'll also find the link to gather this information if you don't have it. And now I'm going to turn this over to Chris Clark, who's going to walk you through our takedown reporting, which is in the merchant portal, to help you with this compliance requirement.
Thanks, Kathy. As Kathy noted, the reporting for the complaints and takedown requests is required now by Visa rules. Their VIRP standard states that a merchant must provide its acquirer with monthly reports that include a list of all content, including URLs and videos, flagged as potentially illegal or otherwise in violation of the Visa rules and standards. The acquirer then must share those reports with Visa on request. So to facilitate that, we've created our own reporting interface in the merchant portal. As Kathy noted, you can file these reports as they come in and resolved. But at the very least, we would need a report filed at least once a month, no later than the 5th, detailing all the complaints, or a nil report if you've had none. So a little print screen here. You log into the merchant portal. Under My Websites, you'll find a link for website content violations. When you click that, you'll have the option to either add a complaint individually or upload a CSV file. So we'll first walk through the individual complaint report. It's fairly straightforward. Now, bear in mind, this is a new tool that we've developed. If you have suggestions on ways to improve it or make things a little more user-friendly, please feel free to pass them on to us. We've already received some really great feedback. The nil reporting option is one area that we are going to address. We're going to simplify that quite a bit. Just to file a nil report, you don't need to list all of your websites. Because we recognize most of our merchants operating the subscription model won't have a number of complaints and takedowns. They'll just want to file that nil report once a month and move on. We've also had a request to add in a reminder, so we'll be looking at that as well. So on this report, the report date, you select your report violation category, and then you provide notes. Now you'll note here, if it is a potential content violation, we are asking for some details of the violation, what happened, who, what, where, why, and if it's one of the more extreme violations, for example, involving CSAM, we really want you to put in as much information as you can, specifically as well, which agencies you reported to. As we know, there's an obligation to report CSAM on the internet. The URLs where it occurred, and on the next page, it's just the resolution status here, the reporter name and contact information. There is an option here to add additional notes. So if you did want to use Segpay's merchant portal website content violations to manage your dispute tracking, you can do that as well. So you can go in there and add an open complaint, leave the status open, and when you've resolved it, you can come back here, change the status, add your final note, and close the report. So you'll be getting a copy of this deck as well. Off of this, you'll have some links to the file format for a CSV, if you just want to upload a file once a month. And then there's some helpful instructional videos. There's a YouTube video and some more instructions in our merchant portal telling you how to complete these filings.
Great. Thank you, Chris. So now I'm going to turn it over to Brian for the next
Kathy.
half of the presentation.
Thanks, Kathy. Thanks, Chris. So let's just talk briefly about the 3 policies that are now required. Consumer age verification policy is an important one, and this needs to be a detailed policy where you outline what you're doing and how you're choosing to comply with any rules that are out there, particularly from a jurisdictional or territorial perspective. The policy can be that you're just blocking these states or countries. You can add a safe for work tour upfront, then do your age verification around the membership after the membership is purchased, or you can age verify prior to accessing any tour or any content. It's up to you, but the important thing is to have a detailed policy that you give to us so that we can store it. And if, for example, you are using age verification tools, it's important to list the detail of what tool you're using, and if you're using different tools by region, for example. So that's the consumer age verification policy. Next one, the important one, the trafficking and prostitution policy. You should really detail the controls that you have in place to prevent your program from promoting any trafficking or abused individuals. You can also additionally participate in some organizations that are listed here, the ASACP, the NCMEC. You can donate to them, but you can also participate in some of their activities of these organizations. But it's important, again, we use the word detail. It's important to add detail into this policy. That's the second policy. The third policy is the affiliate marketing policy. And really the core here is that you should know and trust your affiliates. The policy should outline how you vet them, how you gather KYC, and include the type of creatives that they're allowed to use in promoting your site, your proposition. They're the three core policies. So let's do a little bit of a recap on some of the core elements. Is it really important? Hopefully you've gleaned from what Kathy and Chris were saying earlier in the webinar. Visa, as Kathy mentioned, has promised to take and is taking a more active role in managing our industry and our vertical. They are already aggressively monitoring and auditing all acquirers. That has been going on for some time. And really, to bring it down to some brass tacks here, what we're talking about is Visa being currently focused on the takedown or the complaint process. But let's talk about the fines. So, for example, for a missing policy, so if we are missing one of your policies, or you are missing one of your policies, or a link is missing, the fine is a minimum $25,000. So this is some serious stuff, particularly for smaller businesses. And if there's a content violation, it's double that to start with, starting at $50,000. So it's quite serious. And yes, it is important that you understand this and adhere to all of the rules. We want you to be prepared. This seminar, this webinar helps you get prepared. It helps us get prepared as well. And the better prepared we are, and the more quickly we get under the hood of this and get it done, then the more likely Visa is particularly to just leave us alone and leave us manage this going forward. They'll have less eyes on us if we do this properly and quickly, which I know a lot of you are already. So thank you for that. And we have some other compliance tools for you. So we've updated our adult content checklist 2.0, which you should have all received on the May 20th. And a lot of you have signed it and uploaded it into our merchant portal already. Thank you. If you haven't, please get it into us ASAP. We also need to get your policies uploaded into the merchant portal. And we will then read them and vet them and come back to you if we have any questions or clarifications. But we need the policies as well as that checklist to be completed, please. Quick reminder of the policies we've discussed and what's required: the content management policy and procedures, the consumer age verification one, which we've just discussed, takedown complaint content removal policy and procedures. We've provided a sample written agreement for third-party content providers for you, and a chargeback fraud mitigation policy. They're the policies that we require, as well as the checklist. While we're on compliance, Kathy, I know there was a couple of things you wanted to remind people of.
Yeah, since we have all of your attention, a couple other reminders. Every year we go through an annual Know Your Business KYB review. It's a requirement of the card brands and also our regulators over in Europe and the UK. If there's no corporate changes, the only thing we're going to gather up will be fresh utility bills for directors and UBOs. We need to make sure passports or driver license are up to date. And if there are any corporate changes, we'll gather those up and make sure that our system's updated, as well as the banks. If you do have updates throughout the year, please let us know as soon as you can, because it's a requirement for us to be on top of it. We don't want someone coming to us saying, what is this corporation that's no longer active, and so on. Please keep an active login for all URLs. We have a requirement to go into the members area of every single one of our merchant websites each month. It really upsets our compliance team when they can't log in, and more importantly, our acquirers ask for the same thing. And so if we don't have an active URL, we get kind of we get a little spanking for that, and we need to get those taken care of. And the very last one, as you all know, every single processor, every single bank does this. URLs are scanned monthly. If you happen to get some content that's flagged for being non-compliant, you have 48 hours to remove that content. And then we also ask you, if you have similar content on your site, to please remove that as well, so we don't keep getting the flags. So that is just about it. We will be sending out this presentation, as well as recording will be available, but there are, in the back of the presentation, we have our compliance guidelines, our complaints link and policy example, which we talked about earlier, the website content violation reporting links to help you do that, and obviously the video that will also show you how to do it. So with that, I think we're going to open it up to questions.
Yeah, thanks, Kathy. Just before we deal with, we have one question, but just before we do that, I want to remind you again, nothing that we have said here or told you today constitutes any legal advice. Please go and get your own legal counsel to make sure you feel comfortable with what you're doing in your business. And we have one question. So let me read the question out. I think we've covered it a little bit, but it's good to make sure we thoroughly cover it. What happens with the filings? Who reviews them? Chris, do you want to take this one?
Certainly. So the filings, once they're submitted to the Segpay system, we will review them to make sure that our merchants are filing reports monthly. We'll check for any reports that are overdue. As Kathy noted in the previous slides, you have 7 days to resolve any open issue. So at a top level, we'll be checking to make sure that timeline is being met in compliance with Visa and MasterCard standards. Beyond that, there is a requirement that the reporting go to the acquirer. So in this case, Segpay is going to forward the reports to the acquirers with any acquirers that have asked for this information to be forwarded to them. Not all of them have, but I expect that will likely change at some point soon. So that's where it's going to go. It's going to go up to the acquiring banks, and if Visa or MasterCard ever request that information, they will forward it on to Visa, MasterCard.
And Brian, it's probably just adding on to that, it's probably worth noting as well that when Visa go back and recheck, the complaint process that merchants have, there's nothing to say that they won't maybe do like a mystery shopper and log a complaint and see if that is handled and reported. So I'm not saying that will happen, but there's a possibility that they may do that. So it's important that all complaints are logged and that they're resolved in the 7 days.
Cool. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Chris. We've got 3 more questions that have popped in, which is great. Thank you for these questions. By the way, they're great questions. Does Segpay offer user age verification as a step when the buyer purchases? Will something like that be possible? Paul?
So that's not something that we have at the moment. I know it's something that we're looking at. It's, as we've seen here from Visa, it is a requirement. We have given options at the moment for how you can, work around it. So either you can block that region or you can have safe work content until the buyer is signed up and has been verified. In the meantime, you will have to find your own, you will have to source your own user age verification tool. But it is something that Segpay is looking into.
Yeah, thanks. We have looked into it. We continue to look into it. And if you need any help in identifying a provider, come to us. We can track one down and help you get up to speed on that. Thank you. Next question. Do the reports need to include any content removed for alleged copyright infringement?
So yes, any request for any takedown request, copyright infringements, DMCA should be reported through this interface. You don't need to attach the content, but if there's obviously the request will need to include links. So you can report those links on the report there and put in your resolution. If it's a valid complaint and the content was removed, mark it as such in the resolution. If you investigated and found out that the claim was not substantiated and you did have full rights, put that in as well. But show that you've recorded it, actioned it, looked into it. And also, we haven't actually talked about this requirement here, but part of the requirement is that Paul, you spoke about this quite a bit yesterday, that you support, sorry, I've lost the, an independent third party for arbitration if there's a dispute about the resolution of any of these complaints. So that's a key component as well.
Yep, good. 2 questions to go. Is Visa already actively auditing merchants, or is this process going to start at a certain date? Great question.
Okay, so for this one, so we received our first, we'll say, non-compliance notification back in April. So we know that Visa has, issued, they have looked at these websites already, and they've given 90 days to get a complaint process put in place. And they have stated that they will recheck these again. So they've given us kind of like a friendly heads up that, we've noticed that there's websites that don't have a compliant complaint process in place. Get it in place. We will be rechecking these.
Right. Thanks, Paul. Final question. What duty do we have to report blatantly harassing or frivolous reports from trolls or clearly non-serious individuals?
The regulation doesn't, or sorry, not the regulation, the rules don't differentiate a frivolous or spurious complaint, just that you report the complaints up to the acquirer. So unfortunately, you will have to report it, but you can, as I said, you can resolve it in the manner that's appropriate and put a note in regarding this, the type of complaint or the fact that it was unsubstantiated.
Thanks, Chris. We've had one final question come in, just popped up. Does the possible auditing by Visa come through Segpay, or is there direct communication with the merchant? Direct communication with the merchant from Visa? No, it will come through Segpay. Just to make you well aware, you will hear from us.
Yeah, so it will come from the card brands to the acquirer, and then from the acquirer to Segpay, and we will reach out to the merchants.
Right.
And to be clear, there isn't really so much auditing. If there's a non-compliance issue, the way we normally see this is a notice of non-compliance is sent from Visa to their primary partner. That is then passed down the chain until it ultimately reaches the merchant. And it will specify whatever element of their program was non-compliant. It usually comes with a non-compliance assessment. Sometimes there's an opportunity to respond or dispute or request a waiver. But you really need to be able to justify in your response why the non-compliance assessment should be waived. And that's where it comes down to evidencing all of this, all of the reports that we're talking about here. To support a potential issue in the future, you can evidence that we have been a good player, we've a good corporate citizen, we've done our best, we have age verification in place, we meet your brand requirements. We have a complaints process. It's very clear. It's conspicuous. It's in the footer. And hopefully we can avoid any issues and continue processing and being profitable for years to come.
We have at the moment around 15 questions, which is great. Thank you all so much for those. So let's rattle through them one by one. I'm going to call out the question. Chris, is it possible to obtain the text of the VIRP for a merchant?
Yes and no. So the MasterCard standard is publicly accessible. You can find that, we can post the link as well. But if you just query MasterCard security rules, and then there's a section talking about adult content requirements. Over here. Yeah, so section 941 of the MasterCard security manual. You can find the full text there. It's very similar to Visa's rules. Visa came out a year or so afterwards, and they often, when one publishes a set of rules, the other will copy it very closely. So, as Kathy mentioned earlier in the presentation, they're almost identical with a few modifications, the age verification piece, and then more specific reporting requirements that had to be done on a monthly basis, as opposed to available on request, which was MasterCard's verbiage. So that can be found there. Unfortunately, Visa does not publish public-facing documentation for VIRP, much to our chagrin. So all we can say is we have seen the VIRP guidelines, but we're not allowed to distribute them.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Paul, the next question is to what extent is it mandatory for the contact form to have the fields provided in the Segpay template? And is that policy mandatory as well?
Okay, so that's a good question. So I suppose just a little background on this first. So the guidance we got from Visa was quite vague on it. So it says, we need to have a complaint process in place. We want it to be as prescriptive as possible to give merchants as much information as possible to help them put in an effective complaint policy and process in place on their websites. So what we've given you is what we feel will be the best possible, best in class complaint process. Should you have all those fields in there? Our feeling is that, they're the basic requirements. We're not asking that the form is very complex. It's basic information, your name, the type of complaint, etc., contact details. So I would say, you should be covering them. I don't like to use the word mandatory, but ideally, take it this way. We're being as prescriptive as possible in order to help you to ensure Visa doesn't come back and say your policy or your process isn't compliant. So that's the stance we're taking on it. So we're trying to help people be best in class with the complaint process. The second part of the question was the policy, is that required? So yes, merchants need to make it clear to the user how their complaint will be handled. So for example, there's a requirement that it's going to be handled within 7 business days. That needs to be made clear to the user that any complaint logged will be handled within that time period. And we also need to see the policy because we need to understand, and Visa requires that we understand how merchants will handle those complaints. So the contact form needs to be there or form, some option for the user to log a complaint, but we also need to see the policy because we need to know how it's being handled. And the user also needs to know what the merchant's policy is and how they will handle the complaint.
Thanks, Paul. Great answer and great question. Thank you. Next question, Chris. If the DSA requirements for a contact form are met by a website, are the Visa requirements covered as well?
I'd say this is really related to the first part of Paul's last answer. The proposed contact form that we've provided is our best effort to address the complaints, takedown requests, potential content violations, terms of service violations that could come up in relation to Visa and MasterCard rules. As Paul said, we're not going to use the word required anywhere, but we'll throw a but in there. We think the fields there meet the requirements and have the minimum level of data that you need to accurately deal with a complaint. I don't think we're asking for an excessive amount of information on the complaint form. You're asking for the requester's information to contact them, details, where it's found, what the issue is. So hopefully that question's already been answered.
Good, thank you. Here's a great question. What will be the consequences for the site if all the requirements are not implemented by the 28th of June? Will there be a prior warning? Or the website will be immediately cut off from payments for non-compliance?
So, Brian, I suppose another word in compliance you don't like to hear, consequences. So, okay, we have set the date as 28th of June because we've given people adequate time to implement this. We need to go back to our acquirers and we need to, let them know, we've agreed to them that we will roll this out with our merchants and we'll make sure the merchants are compliant. Nobody likes to talk about, what if something isn't done, but at the end of the day, we need to make sure we're complying with the Visa requirements. We're giving you all the tools and the information to help you require, and we've given, adequate time. We feel that within those 30 days, that's enough time to meet those requirements. Come the end of the 30 days, if the websites are not compliant, then we will need to review them. And unfortunately, yes, there will be consequences because we can't continue to process for sites that may be non-compliant. And that's all to protect you as a merchant, because if your site is non-compliant, then you do risk getting a fine from Visa. So we're protecting you as well as protecting ourselves. And also we have an obligation not only to Visa, but also to our acquiring partners. And at the end of the day, this complaint process, it's important that, you know, if a user comes across content that they feel is illegal or brand damaging or was non-consensual, there has to be an easy way for them to, you know, log a complaint about that content. So this request in itself isn't something excessive. You know, all merchants should be complying with it. All merchants should be allowing users to have an easy way to log a complaint.
Thanks, Paul.
I would just add to that, Paul, I think you did a great job in answering that, but to clarify the dates, the June 28th date is a Segpay imposed date. This is our effort to resolve the issue within the 90-day time frame that Visa gave many acquirers and many payment facilitators and payment service providers to get the complaints policy sorted out and fully become compliant with the VIRP. So that was 90 days, but that was a month and a half ago. So we're trying to put in a stage process to give folks time to ask the questions, get a page up, make sure the process is in place. When it comes down to it, this program is already in effect. So Visa could today, right now, as we're speaking, be looking at one of our websites and saying, this is not compliant. So that hopefully that provides some context. They've just sort of, they've thrown a shot over the bow and said, listen, we're going to start looking at this, get it sorted out.
Thanks, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
Good advice. Interesting question here. There is this requirement regarding, quote, allows such a disagreement to be resolved by a neutral body at your expense. The question is, does this mean that complying with Article 20 of the DSA is sufficient in this case?
I'm going to jump in there and say that sounds like a question for a lawyer, and we don't have any lawyers on the panel here.
Yeah,
the only other thing I could say is that is text from the rule, so that's what we're echoing there. The rule specifies that if there's a disagreement, it has to be resolved by a neutral body. How that's interpreted and implemented for your particular business is between you and your lawyer, I think.
Yeah, I'm not so fully up to date on the Digital Services Act, but I think that article refers to having an internal process for reviewing it, whereas the card scheme is required to be handled by a neutral body. So, but I think like you said, Chris, it's more of a legal question.
Thanks, guys. Good answers. Another question, and we're getting questions come in as we go along. So we're up to, I think we have 19 left to go, just for everybody to be aware. We'll rattle through them. And it's great that you're so engaged in this. Thank you all so much for your questions. Can we do this via an API so we can report this immediately when it's filed and handled internally?
I think that's a great, sorry, are we?
No, go ahead.
It's actually something I wanted to cover on the reporting interface as well. Visa and MasterCard weren't prescriptive in terms of the reporting interface and how to structure it. So you may get different implementations from different payment providers and acquirers. If there are suggestions, we welcome them. Right now, we're already working on simplifying the nil reporting because there's been some confusion about that, and we can simplify it. And the vast majority of our merchants, operating in a subscription-based environment with studio content, they're not going to have a lot of inquiries and takedowns and complaints. So they'll just be filing the nil report. So that's an area that we're going to address quickly. And yes, I think an API is something that we would definitely want to invest in as well. So yeah, thank you for that.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Paul. Next question. Given the DSA, does the VIRP CAV mean we now need to block Europe as a whole if we don't want to do age verification?
Okay, so age verification. So again, on this case, I'll refer back to what Visa has required. So their requirement is that if you need to comply with the local laws. So for any region where you're allowing viewers to access your site, you need to ensure you are complying with the local laws in those regions. We've given options. And Kathy ran through them earlier. So for example, you can block traffic from a certain region, you can have safe for work content, you can make sure, ensure that there's no adult content available until the person is signed up and has been verified. So there are options there, but ultimately, as the card scheme says, any country where age verification laws you know, applying to people viewing content are in place, you need to make sure you're complying with them. And that needs to be stated in your policy as well.
Thanks, Paul. Another question. Thank you for this. Good question. Should age verification policy include each country in the world with age verification regulations? France, Germany, for example.
So I don't know if you need to be
mostly-
that in depth on it. Like, is this question, my understanding is you're asking, you know, do we need to list every country and how we handle those countries? You know, every country where those laws are applicable. I don't know if that's necessarily required. Just overall, how do you handle this in general? So for example, in countries where there are laws, this is how I handle it. For example, in the States, you have various states where those laws apply. But I don't know if you need to list out each individual state. You can just say how you're handling it and and if you're, you know, the tools you're using, name the tools that you're using. But as long as the policy is in itself is detailed as in how we do it, we're not asking that you go into every country, but at least you detail how you handle the age verification. So a simple statement like, we conduct age verification on viewers, that's not sufficient because that's not telling us how you do it. We need to understand how you conduct it and what tools you use. And again, you know, this isn't kind of like, you know, being big brother or stuff. This is, you know, it's just part of compliance. We need to understand what you're doing. You know, it's not that we're doubting the merchants. It's not that we're doubting that you're doing, that you have these controls in place. It's just that we need to understand how you do it.
Thanks, Paul. Good advice. A great question here. Are the fines for takedown per piece of content or as a whole? Chris?
So with respect to VIRP, it would be, so we don't like the term fines. It's a non-compliance assessment. That we've been schooled in that particular terminology. Likely it would be a single non-compliance assessment, and that would be my best guess. Again, we don't have a crystal ball. It would depend on the specific nature of the violation or violations, and how whichever brand is looking at it interprets that. But my expectation is it would be a single violation, but that's, you know, it's still $25,000, $50,000 for the first violation.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Chris. As a pay site, do we need to send KYC to all affiliates? And how can we police 100% of what others do?
That's a good question. You know, how do you manage what your affiliates are doing? I suppose the way we need to look at it is, you know, you're benefiting from traffic from these sites. So you have an obligation to see how are you being marketed by those sites, or how are they sending traffic over to you? And the card schemes do require that you have some control over your affiliates. So you need to know who your affiliates are. You need to vet them. You need to be comfortable with them. You need to be comfortable with the traffic that they're sending over to you. So, you know, we would say you can't just sign up an affiliate. You need to have some controls in place and know, you know, what they're doing, know who they are, and also, you know how they're promoting your site or how they're sending traffic to your site. Because ultimately, you are responsible for any traffic that comes to your site and how your site is promoted.
Thanks, Paul. When submitting a nil report on the content complaint piece, must you include each individual URL with no complaints in the report?
It's a good question. A few people have raised that. So the answer is no. That would be not much fun for a number of our merchants that have hundreds of sites. So that's one of the areas we're going to update when we revise the nil reporting. For right now, I would just put in www all sites or something to that effect when you're submitting a nil report until we get it updated.
Thanks, Chris. Interesting question next. We would expect that most financial institutions would have exposure to the UK's Modern Slavery Act, and this will influence Visa's approach to modern slavery and sex trafficking policies. Do you have best practice recommendations for merchants with complex supply chains?
Okay, so interesting. Okay, so when it comes to the whole, the whole aspect of sex trafficking, human trafficking, anti-slavery, all that, that is, even apart from the car brands, that's a very serious area, and it's, something that, we're committed against, and we would, all our merchants, we believe, will be, committed against ensuring that there's anything on their websites or that they in any way facilitate something like that. With regards to writing policies and stuff, we don't provide, policies, for the merchants, but I suppose tips or some advice we can maybe give on that. When it comes to human trafficking and sex trafficking, I suppose you want to make it clear in your policies, that you're committed to ensuring that your site does not facilitate it, that you don't work with partners, or you don't work, you don't have providers that in any way are involved or facilitate that either. Training your staff are trained to identify and report any suspicions of human trafficking, etc. Ensuring that you have adequate content moderation and age verification that would also identify issues like this. If, for example, you're looking at content, or you're sourcing content from third parties, what's the situation? Do the models look under duress? What's the situation, the background or where they're filming from? How are payouts done? Do you look at chat logs? What kind of wording is being used? Things like that. So it's important you review your suppliers as well. And also we do recommend working with associations. There's a number of associations out there that are anti human trafficking, anti-slavery. For example, you have the Internet Watch Foundation, you have the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. There's a number of them out there. We do encourage merchants to get affiliated with them.
Thanks, Paul. Great answer. Let me read this one out in full as an example here as well in this question. But does Segpay or its acquirers require that the merchant obtain the 2257 documents for content they license from a studio? So, for example, if I run a site and buy my content from studios and list the studios as the custodians of record, is that sufficient for the VIRP? Or do I need to collect the 2257 consent and identity documents for every performer appearing in every piece of content I'm licensing?
Another good question. So the answer is this is addressed really in the rules with respect to the fact that each merchant must enter into a written agreement with each content provider. It doesn't require that you obtain all of the age verification and model release information for every set that you license or stream. However, you do need to ensure that the studio, the licensee, has certain safeguards in place. You need to require that the content provider has the records on file, that they've got the consent to be depicted, allowing for public distribution. I mean, this is in a standard model release, you will have that. That it'll be made available for download. That's a new sort of twist that came in a few years ago in relation to a lawsuit that most of us are probably familiar with. So I suppose the answer really is you still need to make sure that the studios have conducted themselves appropriately. You need a copy of their policies and their procedures. And I think we mentioned on a few slides previous that you actually go and ask for a few samples. This way you can verify. So you get a copy of their policy and procedures, but then you verify that they actually can provide it in the event you were called to the mat. It's fine. It's not fine just to say, well, I licensed it, it's not my responsibility. If you're publishing it, you're ultimately responsible. And you have to review it before it goes up. Even if you buy it from a studio or license it from a studio, you are still responsible for reviewing it before you publish it to make sure it does not contain content in violation of standards.
And just to add on to Chris's point there, Brian, just because this is something that merchants will have seen. When we're onboarding websites or onboarding new merchants, you will often get a request from our compliance team asking for model IDs and consent forms. So they may pick a sample of models. So when we're reviewing the websites, because every website that's boarded at Segpay has to go through a compliance review. So we'll review it internally. We also use third-party tools. But as part of that review, we may ask for model IDs and consent documents for a random selection of models, or models that we feel, they may look underage. Even if that content is, bought from a third party, you are still required to provide that to us. So going back to Chris's point, you may, do spot checks yourself, but please be aware that Segpay may also reach out to you and ask for ID documents. And even though you got it from a third party, you still will have to provide those to Segpay, because ultimately, as Chris said, you are responsible for whatever is posted on your website. You can't rely on the fact that you purchased it from a third party, because you're the one hosting it. You're the one benefiting from that content.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for clarification, and thanks, Chris. Next question, interesting. We occasionally receive spurious or mistargeted demands via the takedown request. So DMCA notices from amateur agencies or fans of a performer trying to help. How do you expect us to report such invalid submissions?
Just report them. Say we received a report, it was investigated, we found it to be invalid, or a DMCA request was, I mean, if the DMCA request is submitted in an invalid format, it's not a DMCA request. So that's one answer. But yeah, if there's a valid request submitted and you investigate and you find out it's spurious and not actionable, you can write that down.
Okay, nice and simple. Thanks, Chris. Interesting question. How many complaints does it take for Visa to close down your account?
So interesting question. Okay, two parts of this. So first of all, you shouldn't be thinking on number of complaints. It's, the severity of the complaints. But this complaint process, there isn't there's no quote on it. What the card scheme is asking is that you have a complaint process in place. So it's not going to say, okay, so you've got 100, we're going to shut you down, or we want to close your account. They want to make sure that people can log a complaint, if they deem, content is brand damaging, illegal, or for whatever reason. Now, obviously, if you're getting a lot of complaints, then and they're valid complaints, and something is wrong. And that's something you need to address. As for, how many complaints would shut me down? I mean, if you get one complaint for something serious like CSAM, that's enough. So I wouldn't be thinking about the number of complaints. I would be thinking, A, I'd be thinking about what are the complaints for, and B, as a merchant, you should be thinking, why am I getting all these complaints? So that's the way I feel you should be looking at it.
Thanks, Paul.
And just again, with every response here, again, this is our interpretation. We're standing back and looking at what we understand Visa and MasterCard rules to be and how they would interpret them themselves. A lot of this is speculation, hopefully from a knowledgeable point of view. But again, we can't provide 100% answers for anything here. This is just our best interpretation.
Thanks, guys. What if you don't do any age verification? What will happen then?
Is that on content or so when you're talking about age verification, so there's two aspects here. So you've got the age verification on the models or the performers, and you've got the consumer age verification. So on the models of the performers, you are obliged to make sure that any content that's published on your site, so whether it's user generated, studio produced, in-house, anything, that the performers are over 18. So you have an obligation. You can't waive that obligation. That's one of the basic rules. You need to make sure that everyone performing is of age and that you've verified that. As for the consumer age verification, in countries where that's required or states where that's required, you need to ensure you're complying with that rule.
Good. Thank you. Thanks, Paul. Just a quick sense check. We've got about 10 minutes to go on the webinar. We've had 29 questions in total. We've got 10 to go. So we will stick on this and answer all of the questions, even if we overrun a little bit. As I say, this is being recorded anyway. But next question. As a company, will we receive an overview from Segpay where we are in the process? So in other words, a checklist which documents have been supplied and approved and what still needs to be done.
Great. So
go
your
ahead.
account manager has been in touch with you, more than likely, and will be chasing you if we have anything missing. That's probably the best answer.
Good. Nice. Next question. Do affiliates have to have this all in place? And should we only work with affiliates who do? If the affiliate does not comply with VIRP, will that affect the pay site who works with them?
I suppose it goes back to vetting your affiliates again. So you need to be comfortable of who you're working with. You need to have done your own due diligence on the affiliates and be comfortable with them. So do you want to work with an affiliate who, isn't complying with the rules or who's sending you traffic, that could potentially affect your website? So we would say, if you're signing up affiliates, you need to manage that program effectively and you need to conduct adequate checks on them and see where that traffic is coming from.
Good. Thanks, Paul. So regarding the policy question, can the policy be on a different page?
So again, I know Chris has mentioned a couple of times and we still need to reiterate it. This is what we've taken. This is our understanding and this is our best, this is the approach we're taking and this is our advice. But again, it's not, it hasn't come from Visa, but it's come from, conversations that we've had with partners, etc. And the understanding we have is that, for example, if you have the policy should ideally be on its own page. For example, if it's hidden amongst the terms and conditions, that may be deemed that it's, not easy to find. So for example, some terms and conditions pages may have, 20 articles in it or 20, subsections, and the complaint policy may be not hidden, but it may be difficult to find within that. So the advice, we're giving is ideally put it on its own page. So on the bottom of your homepage, first of all, it needs to be available to anyone without requiring them to log in. So have it on your homepage, your link on the bottom, content removal, complaint request, etc. Click on that link, and then ideally it brings you to a page which just explains, or just provides a complaint policy there and the contact form link. Again, we're not going to say it has to exactly be like that. That's our recommendation. As long as it's easy to find, it's easy to read, it's not hidden, it doesn't use difficult language, that could be unclear to cardholders, we look at that as well. At the end of the day, just make sure it's a clear, easy to use process for users. And sometimes it might seem like, we're making life difficult for people. We're only doing this to try and protect you and also to make life easy for the users and the visitors to your website. So it's aimed to help people. I would say ideally put it on one page. But again, a lot of this as well is common sense. So we're not going to be, that black and white about it, but we've issued our recommendations and we would strongly advise you to follow those.
Thanks, Paul. As requests should be resolved within 7 days, what are all the conditions for marking a request as resolved?
It's an interesting sort of detailed question. And I'm not sure that we can provide a great answer to it. The rules specify that everything has to be resolved within 7 days, but I've had the same question myself, that there will at times be complicated complaints that will take more than 7 days. So my view is, at the very least, you need to respond to it and try to action it within the 7-day period. That's as a minimum. Paul, do you have another view?
I was just going to say, keep in mind as well that even if a complaint is resolved, there is an option for, people. There has to be an option for people to appeal it. So, I take Chris's point. Some complaints you may not be able to resolve within 7 days. Resolve just means, my understanding would be that you've taken the necessary action. Now, the user may not necessarily agree with that, and that's why you will have an appeal process in place. Also keep in mind, if something is deemed, illegal content, for example, you're not going to wait the 7 days to resolve that. It's going to be handled immediately. So the 7 days is the rule for resolving, but you know, keep in mind illegal content handled immediately, and there's an appeal process for people who aren't happy with your resolution.
Thanks, boys. Can you create an automated pop-up in the dashboard so that we can remember to submit the nil report every month?
It's something we can add to the list. And again, you know, we're open to the feedback. Like Chris said earlier, we built this to help merchants. So at the end of the day, we want something that works for merchants. So any feedback we get, like the API request, we will, you know, gather all those feedback and see, you know, what can we implement, what will work for merchants. At the end of the day, like I said, we don't want to make life difficult. I know sometimes it may appear that compliance likes to make people's life difficult. I can assure you, that's not our aim. We want to protect people, and whatever we can do to improve this tool, especially around the nil reporting, to make it, you know, to streamline it, make it a lot easier, we're certainly open to feedback. So please, you know, do feel free to, you know, any feedback in general that you have, do feel free to pass it on to your account manager, and we will, you know, we take all feedback seriously.
Thanks, Paul. When you say resolved on a complaint, this could mean the content will not be removed as well, correct? As in, we have all the documentation and it's not illegal.
Correct. And that's why they called out in you know, in the VIRP as well, that, for example, if somebody logs an appeal, you have to handle that appeal. So, for example, somebody may make a complaint about content saying that there was no consent. If you have consent on file, you know, you may use that, you know, you may use that as an argument saying, okay, well, I have consent. You're going to keep that content up. But do keep in mind that you have to allow an option for a person to appeal your decision. So yes, a complaint doesn't necessarily mean that content will be removed. It can mean it stays on the site, but you have to give an explanation as to how you resolved it. And you also have to allow the person to appeal that decision.
Right.
And there are two actual statuses for resolution. There's the status field, which is an open or closed or something in mediation, but then there's also resolution status. So if you did have a content removal request, for example, and you investigated and found out that the removal request was invalid because you had model release information and age verification and it was properly licensed, you would set the resolution status of that to declined, meaning it was a no violation found. So you'd still close it and mark it declined. Now, if you investigated and found, you were missing model release, let's hope not, but then you would say, close the status and set the resolution status to approved, meaning the content was removed. Those statuses are explained within the merchant portal, and you can actually see them all written out if you look at the CSV documentation.
Thanks, Chris. Conscious we're on the button. 3 questions to go. I think we've covered this off already, but just in case our attendee is still with us for the purposes of completion. Does the complaint link need to be on the footer of the site and accessible from anywhere within the site, or is a link in the terms and conditions good enough?
I would say, have it on the footer. So again, important things here are, keep in mind, it has to be easily accessible and it has to be accessible without requiring somebody to log in. Like I mentioned before, having something in the terms and conditions, it may be deemed that it's not hidden, probably isn't the right word, but difficult to find. So I would say put the link on the footer on the homepage, have it on the website footer. That's our recommendation. That's our opinion. That's what we feel would be best to meet with the car brand requirements. I don't like I've seen many websites where the terms and conditions can be quite cluttered or quite hard to read through. So I feel having it in the terms and conditions, it may be difficult to find, and I would strongly recommend that you have a separate link. Again, like we should on our guidance that was circulated the end of last month.
Yeah, Paul doesn't like to use the term required, but I'd say that's really more of a requirement than we recommend. The complaints, all the direction we've received, it needs to be very visible. It needs to be in your site footer.
Thanks, guys.
Yep.
Second to last question. Technically, the Digital Services Act is not a local law. Does that exclude this?
I think that goes back to it's a legal question again. We need to make sure we're complying with what Visa and MasterCard have mandated. The Digital Services Act, I'll defer to Chris's comment. You'll need to discuss with your legal team on that. I don't want to give an opinion on that because I'm not fully up to date on it. But when I did look at some of it, the complaint procedure was internal versus the card scheme saying you have to use an independent third party. So I think there are differences.
Great, thanks, Paul. Final question, and then I'll just pass it back to the panel one by one for any final comments. Final question is, what if I use a free open source for age verification? Will that be allowed?
I mean, we're certainly not going to dictate that you need to spend a fortune on age verification. If there's an open source tool that you can use that's effective, let us know. I think that's the key, though. You need to effectively comply with the age verification requirements. If you can find an open source solution that does that and you can evidence that, fantastic.
Right. Thanks, Chris. So that's it. That's all the questions dealt with. Thank you all for submitting those. Really appreciate that. Some great questions. Some final thoughts, I think, from the panel before we depart. Paul, thoughts on today or even thoughts on yesterday as well that are on top of your mind?
So I'd like to thank everyone for joining and for Kathy for hosting this. I think it's important that, we should, it shows, our commitment, and also by you merchants joining, it shows your commitment to ensuring that you do comply with the visa regulations. As has been stated many times, this is just our interpretation of the visa rules, and we're trying to give you the best advice possible. We've been quite prescriptive, and the aim of that is it's not to hinder you or to put obstacles in your way. It's to try and help you ensure you comply and to avoid you getting any non-compliance assessment from the card schemes. So thanks everyone for joining.
Thanks, Paul. Chris, your thoughts?
Thanks everyone for joining. I think what Paul said is a great summary from the compliance side of things, so I will leave it at that.
Perfect, thank you. I did see one little question pop up there about which policies need to be stored. If you have a look at the deck when we send it out to you, it's all listed in there. That'll refresh your memory. But finally, Kathy, over to you to close our webinar.
Yep, I just want to thank everyone for joining, taking the time out of your day to take a moment to listen to our compliance requirements and making sure that we're all in step with Visa's program. As we've all said, if we're compliant and we're doing the right things, we don't have people in our hair, and allows us to really focus on our business and doing what we love to do, which is growing our business. So thank you again, Brian. Thank you.